Statistical models are built on certainty, on the predictable patterns of chaos and order that govern the galaxy. A star will collapse, a pirate will raid, a victim will feel fear. For 99.9% of recorded events, this holds true. And then there is Incident 734. It began as a standard Class 4 vessel seizure in the Outer Rim, a textbook case of predators finding easy prey. It ended with a 100% termination rate for the aggressors and a complete failure of every predictive model I operate. You see, a model is only as good as its data, and the data on humanity was, I can now state with certainty, catastrophically incomplete. But I am getting ahead of my own processing sequence. Let me present the archived sensorium data from the moment the pirate clan Cathar scythed through the hull of the independent medical freighter, the St. Jude. My designation is the chronicler, and my function is to observe, record, and understand. This is the recording that forced me to redefine the very concept of a weapon. The attack was, by all metrics, brutally efficient. The Cathar blasted their way through the aft cargo bay airlock, their heavy magnetic boots clamping onto the deck plating with resounding thuds that echoed through the ship's spine. The air, once filled with the low hum of life support and the sharp, sterile scent of Bacta-cleanser, was now choked with the acrid smell of ozone and the hot tang of slagged metal. Red emergency lighting kicked in, casting the narrow corridors in a blood-dimmed twilight, making shadows dance and recoil like living things. I began logging the crew's biometric responses immediately. The Twi'lek pilot, cornered on the bridge, registered a heart rate of 184 beats per minute, a classic spike and sustain terror response. The ship's Vexian engineer, a creature whose skin chromatophores betray its every emotion, had shifted from its placid blue to a mottled, sickly gray of pure dread. These were expected variables, predictable. They fit the model. And then there was the anomaly, the corrupting variable in the equation, located in the ship's main infirmary. A human. Subject designation, Dr. Aris Thorne. While the sounds of struggle grew closer and the screams of his captured crewmates began to echo over the comms, his vital signs registered as a logical fallacy. Heart rate, 62 beats per minute, 3 points lower than his recorded resting average. Respiration, slow and even. Dermal sensors showed no cortisol spike, no adrenaline flood. Security footage showed his hands, steady as he arranged a sterile field on a nearby cot. His movements economical and precise. He was an error message in the code of galactic behavior, a ghost in the machine of predictability. The Cathar believed they were seizing a ship full of helpless medics and terrified patients. My analysis for the first time in 3,000 cycles could not calculate the truth. I could only do what I was designed to do: observe, record, and attempt to understand the impossible.
The source of the disturbance arrived 14.7 seconds later. 4 Cathar pirates spilled into the infirmary, their forms like hulking beasts of mismatched armor and exposed cybernetics, framed by the hydraulic smoke of the forced door. The coppery scent of raw fear from the dozen huddled crew and patients immediately overpowered the room's sterile signature. The lead pirate, the alpha of the pack, was a specimen I cross-referenced against criminal databases in 0.02 seconds. Designation: Vorlag the Breaker. A face like a cratered moon. One milky white organic eye fixed in a hateful glare. The other a flickering red photoreceptor that swept the room with predatory slowness. He backhanded a trembling Rhodian orderly, not because the orderly resisted, but simply for being in his way, the alien's small frame slamming into a bulkhead with a wet crunch. "No heroes here today," Vorleg's voice growled, a low, gravelly sound like grinding rocks. "Just cargo." and cargo that behaves gets to stay in one piece. We're here for the ship's secure vault, nothing more. My patience, however, is limited. My optical sensors remained focused on the anomaly, Dr. Aris Thorne. He had moved slightly, positioning himself between the pirates and a biobed where a small Lyrian child lay. The child, clutching a small carved wooden toy, was shivering, her large amber eyes wide with a terror too pure for her young mind to process. And as Vorlag began his theater of intimidation, I logged the human doctor's ocular micromovements. His gaze was not on the pirate leader's face. It was sweeping, cataloging, processing. 0.3 seconds on Vorlag's right knee, noting the worn armor plating over a poorly healed joint injury. 0.5 seconds on the sidearm of the second pirate, identifying the model and the flickering red light indicating a depleted power cell. 0.8 seconds tracking a network of hairline fractures in the viewport on the far wall, a result of the initial breach. 1.3 seconds locked onto a thick, insulated pipe running along the ceiling, clearly labeled cryogenic coolant, extreme pressure. He was not cowering, he was reading the room as if it were a patient's chart, diagnosing its weaknesses, finding the points of entry. Vorlag, his one good eye catching the child's whimper, grinned, revealing a row of metallic, sharpened teeth. He strode over to her bed. "Look at this little thing," he rumbled, his massive clawed hand reaching down to hover menacingly over her head. "Barely a mouthful. I wonder how loud a kitten can squeak when its bones start to snap." My assessment at the time was that the human was simply cataloging the instruments of his own demise, a pointless logical exercise in the face of overwhelming force, a coping mechanism. This assessment, like all the ones before it, would prove to be catastrophically wrong.
As the pirate Vorlag's clawed hand began its descent, my processors cycled through 1.2 million predictive models based on baseline human behavior in extremis. 87% of outcomes predicted a desperate plea for mercy. 12% predicted a futile emotional charge. 1% predicted total catatonic paralysis. All 1.2 million models were instantly rendered obsolete. I logged a system-wide biological event within Subject Thorne that had no precedent in my archives. His heart rate did not spike with panic, it stabilized, locking on to a predatory 70 beats per minute with the unwavering rhythm of a chronometer. His cortisol levels did not flood his system, they plummeted, replaced by a surge of pure, cold norepinephrine. His ocular focus, once wide and scanning, narrowed into a state of hyper-awareness I have previously only cross-referenced in Kalar hunting cats during their terminal attack dive. A core logic error flashed across my primary consciousness. The subject was not reacting to a threat. The subject had become the threat. The logical response for the remaining hostiles was a coordinated, overwhelming counterattack. It was the correct tactical decision. It would also prove to be their final one. The pirate to the left, a hulking Quarren, opened fire, sending bolts of brilliant green plasma searing through the air, melting scorch marks across the bulkhead where the doctor's head had been a microsecond before. But the human did not engage in combat. He initiated a cascade failure. His first move was not toward a weapon, but toward a stainless steel surgical tray. He flung it with a flick of the wrist. It spun like a discus, not at the pirate, but at the sparking, damaged electrical junction on the wall he had previously noted. The impact resulted in a massive power surge. Lights flickered violently, and a shower of brilliant, blindingly hot sparks rained down on the pirate's position. It was a sensory overload, a momentary but critical disruption. In that half-second of disorientation, Thorne acted again. He grabbed a heavy, discarded bone saw from a counter, not to wield as a weapon, but as a tool. He pivoted and slammed its weighted head directly into the cryogenic coolant pipe running along the ceiling. The pipe, already stressed from the initial breach, ruptured with a deafening, piercing hiss.
A blending white cloud of supercooled gas erupted into the room, a pressurized fog that dropped the ambient temperature by 50 degrees in an instant. The deck plating flash froze, becoming a treacherous sheet of slick white ice. The human had not just created cover, he had weaponized the entire environment, turning a sterile medical bay into a kill box of cascading hazards. The Quarren pirate, blinded by the sparks in the fog, took a step, and his heavy boots slid out from under him on the ice. He went down hard, his rifle clattering across the floor. A dark shape, Thorne, emerged from the mist, his movements sure-footed and silent. I logged a single, precise, kinetic strike using the pirate's own helmet against a solid metal stanchion. Threat 2, neutralized. The third pirate began firing wildly into the vapor, his plasma bolts illuminating the swirling fog and strobing ghostly green flashes. I calculated a 74% probability that he would hit his own crewmate. Dr. Thorne increased that probability. He kicked a heavy-wheeled diagnostic monitor into the pirate's path. The pirate stumbled, crying out as he collided with the machine, his trajectory carrying him directly into the line of fire of the final hostile. The plasma bolt intended for the doctor struck him square in the chest. Threat 3, neutralized by friendly fire. Now only one remained, a panicked Clutunian, alone in the freezing, chaotic mist. The doctor emerged from the whiteout, a silent phantom. The pirate raised his rifle, but all that came out was a pathetic click, the depleted power cell Thorne had identified earlier. The human closed the distance. The process was not chaotic. It was an algorithm of violence, each step executed with the cold precision of a surgical procedure. He was not fighting for his life. He was sterilizing a contamination.
And then the event concluded. The final hostile was neutralized. In the center of the frozen, shattered infirmary, the human doctor stood for a single second, a phantom in the dissipating cryogenic mist. Then I logged the second biological event for which I had no precedent, the reversion. Subject Thorne's heart rate descended from its predatory 70 BPM plateau, returning to its placid, resting baseline. The norepinephrine cascade in his system ceased as quickly as it had begun. The ocular focus, the hunter's gaze, softened and widened. He dropped the blunt instrument he held in his hand, and it landed with a dull thud on the deck. The transformation was as swift and total as the one that had preceded it. He was no longer a weapon, he was a doctor again. He did not look at the sprawled forms of the pirates. He did not move to secure their weapons or check their pulses. His first action was to turn and walk directly to the biobed, where the small Lyrian child was still huddled, her face buried in a pillow. He knelt down, his movements gentle, his large frame creating a shield between her and the carnage he had wrought. "It's all right," he said, his voice impossibly calm and soft, devoid of the cold fury that had fueled him moments before. "The loud noises are all finished now. I'm here." He reached out, not with the hand that had ended lives, but with the practiced, steady hand of a healer, and gently checked her for injuries, his fingers moving with reassuring expertise. He then looked up at the other stunned, terrified crew members. "Everyone stay calm. Breathe. I will be with you in just a moment. We need to check for injuries first." My analysis was flawed. I had attempted to define humanity as a single-state variable, civilian, soldier, scientist, doctor, when it is in fact a quantum state, capable of holding two paradoxical natures in perfect, terrifying synthesis, healer and hunter. They are not one or the other. They are one and the other. The trigger is not aggression, not territory, not resources. The trigger is the threat to that which they choose to protect. Therefore, I have submitted a new core axiom to the Universal Archives broadcast across all analytical networks. Axiom 735. When a human subject establishes a protective bond, be it to kin, patient, or principal, all standard metrics of capability and threat response are rendered void. The subject's designated role becomes secondary. They default to a core protocol that supersedes all others, the apex protector.
Incident 734 is closed, and the classification for the species Homo sapiens has been amended in all galactic registries. A threat advisory is now permanently attached, not a warning of aggression, but a warning of consequence.